Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Jerome Gary, who is a Hollywood producer and I think kind of a Forrest Gump like figure in the field of consciousness and consciousness studies. Jerome, you have uncannily, I think, popped up in almost every single major consciousness movement since the late 60s when you did LSD experiments in San Francisco with John Lilly. Then you also did practiced out of body experiences with Bob Monroe at the Esalen Institute. You did a lot of
Yeah,
stuff at Esalen.
yeah.
And then you were screened for the remote viewing program at Stanford Research Institute for, I think, about 2 years. Is that right?
I flunked out after 2 years.
And then
There was a
you've,
third year. Yeah,
yeah, well, yeah, but you made it 2 years, and that's
yeah. I
super
could
impressive,
do
I
remote
think.
viewing, like, but not more than 1,000 miles, or I don't know what it was. But
Y- Oh,
anyway,
that was your limit.
no,
You
I
couldn't
don't
do
know
more.
why they dropped me. I mean, there are a lot of things. Well, anyway, we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then you've just had an incredibly creative life, I think. And I think objectively just a brilliant guy.
Well,
And
thank you,
yeah,
thank you.
just really want to explore the life you've lived. So maybe could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. When I got out of school, I was raised. My parents had a lot of money, and starting when I was about 18, I just couldn't get out of town fast enough. I just hated the world. I hated the clubs. And I was raised to take over my family's non-telephone businesses, which were substantial. And when I turned 21, after briefly going to law school to get out of the draft, I said I just didn't want to do it. So I left my. I was disinherited, and I didn't talk to my parents for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I went to
And who,
California.
okay, tell us a little bit about your stepdad, who you were disinherited from.
He was the chairman of General Telephone. His family, the Gary Telephone, you know, controlled the patents to dial telephone. So,
Yeah.
every time somebody made a call, they made some little incremental. They made, this hugely wealthy guy. The patents expired, I think, in the early '60s, or the renewed whatever patents. But, so I was just unbelievably spoiled, and I just couldn't find anybody I wanted to be like, even though my stepfather was a real mentor and made me good at, business. So I left and I went to California, and I was trying to figure out how to be and who to be, and trying to sort of unwind from all of the crap that I'd grown up with. And so, it was the new age. It was the new age in California. And so I just sort of shopped in this supermarket of the soul, going to these different places, these different people that seemed to me that could be helpful, whether it was meditation or yoga or tai chi, whatever. And I did these things, and I hope, helped. And then was in business because I had to survive, and I made a little bit of money, but little, enough to keep enjoying myself. And then in 1975, I wanted to be in the film business for very embarrassing reasons. But um, I love film, and I got into the film business, and I sort of put at risk everything I'd made in order to make Clipping Iron, where I saw the book in the store, and I decided that it would be a good movie, and I partnered with the photographer on the book, George Butler.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, and after a tumultuous relationship, out came the film, and all of a sudden I was a 28-year-old, hot shit young producer who could get in the door at Studio 54.
Yeah. Well, that
You
movie has just been so impactful, and the way you came to it was so almost uncanny. I mean, Bob Evans, I think, told you that you needed to own a property if you wanted to be
yeah,
a producer. And
yeah,
then you just saw the book Pumping Iron in a bookstore window.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the reason I wanted to be a producer is sort of slightly embarrassing, but nevertheless, Bob Evans was the head of Paramount, and he's one of these sort of gadflies that are sorely missing in Hollywood, because he takes much more credit for films like The Godfather, et cetera, because he was running Paramount at the time. But he was a gadfly that made people make their films as auteurs as good as they could get. And of course, doesn't exist anymore. And there are about a dozen of those guys that are missing. But I met him, and he was going out with an old girlfriend of mine who'd become, Lisa Taylor, had become the biggest model in the world. I was sort of like a big brother to her. She was 22, I was probably 26, something like that, 25. And I start hanging out with Bob Evans. I mean, she brought all her boyfriends around for my, approval, like Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty, all these people. But I got to be friendly with Bob Evans, and he was a very smart guy and kind of avuncular. And he invites me to these openings and all these beautiful women. I think, I think I want to direct. I think I want to produce movies.
And that,
And
okay,
so
that's it. Because I
that's
think
it. That's it. It's it. But then
so much of the thread of your life is chasing women. And that's how you get into a lot of this new age stuff is just you're after a girl.
No, not so.
Okay.
Not so. Not the new age stuff, because those were not like to act. I mean, those are sort of self improvement related. But no, I don't think so. But the reason I got in the movie, by the way, that is
That's fair.
embarrassing. But I mean, I was, I owned, before that, I'd owned a bunch of art house movie theaters. I had, I was a big fan. I was an art, film critic in college. I was very much into film, but my motive was, nakedly speaking, was, God, this guy, all these women around. He's kind of he's short, kind of, I don't know, not particularly good looking. So and so he said, I said, Bob, I want to produce movies. He said, well, you have to have a property. And I went, good. I have a farm in California. I said, no, 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 no. A literary property. It shows you how much I knew. And so I, passed the store, and there was Flipping On. I thought that'd be a good movie. Boom.
Yeah. So, okay. So you made a self-deprecating joke in the beginning about, as an old guy, you can only be a Hollywood producer, or you can only produce in Hollywood, but one, not true, but two, this is how you started your career as producing.
I started, but in documentary, producing is the big credit. The documentary, in other words, it's as much directing as it is producing. So that's a little deceptive. The next big film I did, a feature film, I directed. It was a documentary, which was about strippers, and it was honestly better than Pumping Iron. But it was called Stripper, and it was honestly better than Pumping Iron as a film. But it was, there was no Arnold of strippers, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, okay, you've had a very creative career, but starting back much earlier, you were a math prodigy, which I think is very interesting, because I think, maybe counterintuitively, math and having a mathematical framework in your mind is such a great starting point for creativity. And I think the best mathematicians I know are some of the most creative people I know.
It's funny. I don't know that many, hot shit mathematicians. I spent the last time with them at, when I was 13 years old, and going to Princeton from Lawrence. What happened to me was that my family got divorced. I was 7 years old. I was sent to a very good boarding school called the Harvey School, and a teacher, Mr. Terry, and he realized that I had an aptitude. And he realized that, like, in a year I went from sort of introductory algebra through, calculus, through all this other stuff I was doing, postgraduate math by the time I left Harvey in 7th grade. Now, how does that benefit me? I mean, I'm a math guy, and so I can be rude. I say, how much it costs, how much this, and people get offended, But I just sort of, it's part of the way I think about the world is the math of it, And so, but in film, how much has it benefited me? Well, I'll give you an example. When I'm doing a series, we have $2 million or $3 million, whatever it is. Any moment, even though there's producers behind me and ahead of me, and I'm directing an episode, I know within a few $100s how much money we have in the bank. I just think that way. I think that way. So there you are.
Yeah. And okay, so you said you were taking graduate level math classes by 7th grade, right?
No, when I went to Lawrenceville, I was 9th grade.
Okay. And where were you taking these classes?
Princeton.
Okay. Were you part of a like gifted and talented program, or how did you get selected?
No. And Lawrenceville was sort of famous for kind of promoting advanced students in a way.
Right.
And I only did this for 1 year, and it was so cumbersome, like, cabs pick you up. And, here we are in 9th grade, and I skipped the 8th grade. So I'm in 9th grade, and I'm not as big as everybody else. So I'm completely full of shit and lie like a rug. And we're this tea dances and all this stuff. And so, like, girls didn't want a guy who's into math and picked up and taken someplace twice a week. They wanted a guy who read Hemingway. So I gave it up. And also, math at a certain point, gets sort of creative.
Right.
And I was not there in my head yet. I could solve any theory, anything, any proof.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really about, well, what if or this or that. I was not yet creative mathematically. I would think I would have been, but I wasn't.
And how old were you when it got to that level for you?
I was 13.
13. And that's when you
Yeah.
stopped taking math. You were taking
Yep.
college level math courses, advanced college level math courses.
Yep.
And that's when you stopped at
Yep.
13. So
Yep.
9th grade, 10th grade, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay. So then, and was that part of your grooming process by Ted Gary, or was that
No.
just...
It's first of all, Ted Gary's my stepfather.
Yeah.
My mother met him when I was 11, and he was a businessman, and my
Yeah.
father was like a saint. He ran the Legal Aid Society, and he was a saint. I mean, he really was. He was an amazingly saintly man.
Yeah.
And he shortly thereafter moved to France and ran a law firm there at Couder, which was very, he ran the Legal Aid Society. And, and I, in my mind, sort of didn't completely connect with everything that he did or thought. And so all of a
Why
sudden,
not?
he, first of all, he wasn't insistent as a father. And he turned out like,
Was he present?
oh God, yeah, he was a fabulous guy, but my mother didn't get along with him very well. He was a very sweet, meek man. And anyway, when I met Ted Gary, he sort of seemed to he just thought this math thing was great. He's going to train me to do this and that. He'd screw it up with his own son. So that's what happened, and he started to train me, and I had jumper jobs here and there in France and restaurants and, working for Echo Products, which was a stationery company. So I was learning all this stuff. He taught me a lot about business.
Yeah. I think Ted Gary is kind of a guy who maybe has been a little bit lost to history. And so maybe people don't appreciate today how, I don't know, the kind of heights of his success. Can you explain a little bit about who he was?
I don't think he's lost to history at all. I mean, first of all, he didn't make all his money. He made some smart investments. I mean, he made one in, Echo Products, which was a company he bought for $1 billion, and it went public in 1983, the day before he died, and at $600 million. But by then he'd sold off bits and bits and bits and bits and bits, and so he only had 7% at that point. But still, that's 40. But I mean, you can imagine he made at least God knows out of that. But he inherited,
adjusted for inflation, also those are huge
and
numbers.
he inherited all this telephone stock and all this telephone cred and all that stuff, and so. So he was, he was an amazingly charismatic guy, but I don't think anyone would say this is a hugely self-made man. No.
Got it. But very influential at the time, I think it is fair to say.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I think my mother was instrumental in that because she was so socially adept.
Right.
Okay. And he was from the Midwest in the days when the Midwest was like China. I mean, people from the Midwest were just. And, I mean, literally when I lived in New York and I went to the Midwest in summer, the fashions were 2 years behind. I mean, it was just so different. And so he was, from Kansas City. So, my mother's access in New York, et cetera, were much more important to him than they were to me or anybody that I knew for that matter.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mother? Because she was kind of an exceptional and in some ways an unorthodox person in her own right.
Well, recently someone has said, "Are you Pat DeBarry's son?" And I went, "Yes," and my stock went soaring, But she's very dedicated, very smart, very dedicated, huge sports fan, really smart. I mean, she was she was doing statistics for the New York Yankees with Dan Todd. She was quick on a slide. She was second or third member of the New York Stock Exchange. A woman and one member, and so she was good. She was a broker. She worked but she was very driven, and she was very devoted to charities, the Boys Club of New York, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the Museum of the City of New York, the Central Park Conservancy, the Botanical Gardens. All of these things she raised countless millions of dollars for. But as such, she was kind of a social gatekeeper, which something that, Ted Gary, admired or was deeply ambivalent about. But, she had a lot of access. She was not,
Yeah.
after
But
she divorced Ted Gary, she wasn't particularly wealthy when she died.
sure, sure. But she also had that mathematical mind that,
Oh,
did you inherit that from her, or where do you think you got that?
her mathematical mind was very practical. When I was working at Payne Weber one summer, I could say what a dimension should go off at 95%. I could do the math like that on the table. And Jim DeFan, who's the head of the company, and I said, whatever it was, I said, and he looks at the guy who has the slide rule. I said, yeah, you're right. After that, they never use slide rules again. They use me. I'm just quick with math. And she was that way. She had these theories about like, if there's a man on base, you walk mirror. Things like
Yeah.
that, because she statistically was very savvy. Yeah, but she was very gracious socially. My wife, who is completely different, adored her, and she aged well. She was a difficult mother. I mean, I was very much abandoned. She was abusive. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you think about that today?
Well, I suppose I don't know. Abuse is something that gets passed on rather readily. So you'd have to talk to my wife, but I don't consider myself abusive. I'm never abusive with my son at all, at all, at all, at all.
Yeah.
But she was just difficult, I mean, it was one of those kind of, her father was a career military guy who was successful in business. And she was the daughter in Greenwich, and he was out of the Round Hill Club, and she had to do this. And it was about conformity and noblesse oblige her whole life, and having children. It wasn't, there's no pleasure principle in it, really, for
Yeah.
her.
I
I
just,
mean,
I
even,
think about the things that you get into, uh, we're about to jump into, that you get into early in life, kind of the explorations of yourself and consciousness and self-improvement. And I wonder how much kind of healing trauma is part of that pursuit, or those pursuits.
I- you know, I don't think, I was all banged up. I mean, I do have this condition that I have figured out called fractured narrative, in other words, which is PTSD. And I was teaching screenwriting, and I realized that I had, or I'm trying to learn how to screenwrite, and I realized that I had this condition where I couldn't tell stories very well. And what happened was my narrative had been broken by trauma. And that I figured out how to heal myself, which is pretty simple. You go to movies and write down what happened after. And you do that about 20 times, and you start to restore causality in your brain. And this was something that allowed me to become a very successful screenwriter for a time.
Right.
And I started teaching, and I loved that. Ooh. But of the people I taught in America, maybe 20% had it in some form. When I taught in Afghanistan, 90%. In
Yeah.
Lebanon, 90%. In other words, trauma, contact. In other words, you can break your narrative by falling off a bike. It's not like I had this terrible trauma happen to me. I was just, as a 7-year-old kid, you're sent away to boarding school. That's kind of like the, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I definitely want to jump into that. Okay. So after high school, where do you go?
I went to Yale,
Yeah.
and I liked Yale. It's cool. It was the hot shit spot. Kingman Brewster, and I mean, it was great for me because I mean, I was afflicted with two things. Number one, I was a slow reader, and I had a quick mind. So, because I was a slow reader, a lot of stuff that was assigned I didn't bother with. I just go to the lecture, take some notes, and then just hallucinated random about it. I mean, in an essay, I was good at that. But it inured to my.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
What do you mean?
That
Yeah.
process of, as you say, hallucinating and then writing about it. I mean, you're not literally
Oh well, I
hallucinating.
mean, I had I had one teacher call me the golden shovel. I just can write about stuff from having, you know, very cursory knowledge and not being confused with the narrative. I can read 2 paragraphs on Oedipus and write an essay about it, and how it was pivotal and whatever, and and so I had enough of my bullshitting was good enough to get me admirably through school. I mean, more than admirably. But it inured to my disadvantage in terms of an education because I still am just there's book of the books behind me, and I probably read half of them. You know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? I just don't. I'm a slow reader. I remember everything, but I'm a slow reader, and that's a very interesting diagnostic tool, by the way, of how fast somebody reads. You know,
How so?
well, when I taught screenwriters, and I taught in a graduate program for 15 years, and I had intimate relationships with about 200 people. And one of the diagnostic tools is uh, uh, how fast you read. And the fast readers are reading for story, and they're not so good at dialogue. And the slow readers have a great ear, but they're not so good at story. It's
That's
interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because I'm reading the words.
Yeah.
And my wife, reads like a rocket, she wants the story. What's going to happen? And blah, 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 blah. But can she quote? No, I can quote. So you know,
Right. I guess that that
there's
makes
not a
sense.
right or a wrong. It's just that it's a very helpful diagnostic tool when you're teaching writers.
Yeah, and I guess if you're a slow reader, you've got a much tighter aperture on what's on kind of the context that you're assessing, right? Because you're
You have a much greater complexity, but you have more difficulty with the looking at the whole thing from 50,000 feet. You know,
interesting, but you're, I think, very good at looking at stories from 50,000 feet.
I have learned.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
after I
Yeah.
directed Stripper, I came out to Hollywood, and I had great opportunities because Hollywood loved Stripper. I mean, they just thought it was the greatest thing.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't mean it was good. It just means they liked it. And I had a lot of opportunities, and I'd walk in. I said, "Well, I want to do something about cheerleading. I don't know what." And then, well, what's the story? I don't know. And so I realized that I just had this was a problem. And then I realized when executives started saying, "Well, if you can get this writer, we'll make you a deal. I mean, we might kick you up into being a producer, but there's a good chance you'll be able to direct it. That's how development works now."
Sure.
And so they'd give me a list of people, and I started reading this stuff, and I'm going like, I can do this, who's shit. And these guys who made a couple hundred grand, writing scripts. And it was in the days when there's a lot of development still going on in the 80s. And so I just taught myself how to write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, early on in your college career, you meet a man named John Lilly.
I worked for him a summer.
Yeah.
He was a friend of a guy who was a boat guy called Dick Bertram, who was a good friend of my father. Bertram's the boats.
I
And
don't know.
Bertram, he was, he created the deep V hull. I mean, and and my father was a big boat racer, and they used to do the Miami Nassau race. I got pulled out of school to go on that race, Miami, Havana, Miami, Nassau. And in those days, ocean racing was largely fast fishing boats. And anyway, this guy I met through Dick Bertram, through my father, John Lilly, and he was doing dolphin research.
Yeah.
He was an MD. And and my mother goes, maybe, my mother was nothing if not gracefully pushy.
And
And he
this
said,
was
well,
kind of
Jerome,
revolutionary research at the time.
yeah, but I didn't know from shit. I didn't know about it. Anyway, so I went there, and he was getting, dolphins were, he was trying to figure out how they talked and how their minds worked and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. And, I got a job as an intern. I mean, I got to get in there with the dolphins and swim around with them. It's really fun. But, it's kind of like, it's like playing with your friends. But I mean, I was not, doing the research. I was a janitor, basically. I was a
Right.
PA. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you absorbing any of this at the time? Did you have any
No.
awareness of kind of the context of the research or anything?
Well, he was very interested in where consciousness went
Yeah.
and charting their consciousness and also the consciousness of human consciousness. And so I became aware of that somewhat. And he started talking about a guy called Uspensky. Now, I was 17 years old. I don't know who that. And Gurdjieff and all these people. And I'm going like, and then he was very intrigued all of a sudden. Was it? There was some guy in South America, asked for a child. There were these people he was interested in, but it
Yeah.
was way above my pay grade.
And
Way,
Gurdjieff
way.
is a mystic, right? He's a Persian
Gurdjieff is
mystic.
a mystic, and he was People say a Sufi, but I argue with that. But he was a mystic, and he came to this country, and he used the Enneagram very successfully, but in an interesting way. The Jesuits used the Enneagram to determine how someone was suited to this and this job. Gurdjieff used the Enneagram to determine what you were weak at, and he made you do it. He was a sadistic bastard. Anyway, but anyway, I heard about all this stuff, and then when I started doing psychedelics, I started reading it all.
Okay, so when do you start doing psychedelics?
I get
And
out.
how?
Okay, I in college, my junior and senior year, but mostly my senior year, I smoked dope a little bit, and that was like, whoa, this is cool. And this sort of ran in parallel to my complete disinterest in going to law school or any other, and my desire to, be in the late '60s and go out to California, get free. And so, but dope was a little bit of a catalyst at that point. I think the best way to put it is it was a catalyst. And
So it
so
was a gateway drug for you.
what? It was a
It
little
was a
bit, yeah,
gateway drug for
yeah.
you. Yeah.
And then, so I get out to the area, and then by then people are talking about mescaline and this, that, psilocybin and all these other things. But I had no knowledge of it. And then I learned that there was a test, a National Institute of Mental Health grant test with psychedelics with John Lilly. So I
Yeah.
thought, shit, I should try to get into that because I was like a janitor, but I was a friend. My stepfather was a friend of his, and Dick Burton was a friend of his, and blah blah blah. He was friendly to me, not because I had some, but so anyway, because it was already filled. But I did get in because he knew me,
Yeah.
and you can never have done psychedelics before.
Okay.
In 1969, the Bay Area is probably only about a dozen people had never done them
Yeah.
before. Everybody at that time had done them all.
Did you know any
Yeah.
of the other participants in the study?
Oh yeah, I did. I mean, they were great. There was a guy. There were a lot of people that are therapists.
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
mean, Claudia Naranjo.
Who's that?
He's a guy whose name comes to mind because he's the guy who said that you like this expression, a glimpse of rooms wherein which you are not yet fit to enter.
Right.
Claudia
I think
Naranjo
that's
was the
such
member.
a beautiful way
Oh,
to
it's really,
describe the
yeah. I mean,
experience.
he's full of that kind of stuff. But there were a lot of people in my, I mean, it's 20 people, 18, 20 people. I didn't know them all because you're going into isolation tanks, but we had sessions together and got to know each other a little bit, but I didn't have any intimate relationship with these people. It's not like we're hanging out in a sauna.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like such an intense way to have a first experience with psychedelics. So describe this setting.
It was in Berkeley, and we would go into kind of one of these Bauhausy look, affiliated with the campus. And he had this sort of basement like thing with all these these little isolation tanks, which are like they're like a jacuzzi but no jacuzzi.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
they're probably,
he invented these isolation tanks, right?
yeah, they are, but I mean there's nothing. It's a as bad an idea as a waterbed that I was also involved in. It's just
Yeah.
it's a bathtub that's about 8 feet in diameter.
But this was
In
like a
diameter, yeah.
fundamental part of John Lilly's broader exploration of consciousness, right?
Well, I mean, it was
Is
what he
putting
used.
people, like removing awareness of the body.
Well, it's not so much awareness of body; it's external inputs.
Okay.
In which nothing's coming towards you. So how
Yeah.
does the mind behave when you are, um, when all sensory deprivation was the term
Yeah.
they used.
Yeah.
But I
That's a
mean,
great
you're
point.
not really sensory deprived because there's the water, and you feel all that. That feels really good. But it's this attempt to neutralize external stimuli. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I
And
know
then you
I've
talk about where you went.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you're in sensory deprivation tanks for these trips, these journeys. And how are you administered LSD?
Right in your thigh, 125 mics, boom.
Injected?
Mhm.
And okay, can you tell us what these experiences were like?
first of all, I mean, it blew everything I'd ever experienced to that point off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Secondly, it was, like it, it did two things. It blew up all of my constructs about the way things were and the way the world was and everything.
Okay, say a
Just
little bit about
boom,
that.
it was just, and all of a sudden, you're just overwhelmed not by your opinions about shit, but by nature itself. And then you start, and then again, the possibilities of things in life and the rest of your life are born, and that's why Claudia Naranjo's quote. So there you are. It
So
was,
what was like
but
your what were your priors here, and how were they blown up, and what were
my
they
priors
replaced
were
by?
I was a rich kid that was being groomed to be a rich kid and work for my stepfather and belong to the Maidstone Country Club or whatever the hell it was, or the beach, whatever, and have a normal, nice, preppy life and drive fast cars. And
And
I
that was
didn't,
it. There, how did
I mean,
you
I didn't
had you
find
done
anything.
any existential analysis up to that point, or was this kind of the birth of an existential
Well,
crisis
I
or
think
analysis or
college,
birth for you?
I
Yeah,
mean, Yale at that time was full of big minds, and it was the great lecture capital of the world. All the great lecturers were there.
yeah,
And I mean, I'm good at lecturing, and like people say, "How did you learn that?" I said, "Well, I just listen to people." They were really good, and I didn't have that much to say. So again, read slowly. I didn't do the homework, and so I listened to these guys, and then I can spew it back, and that's what they wanted to hear. But I think invariably in the '60s in college, you start to question. I mean, Ted Gary was a Republican. I mean, and not. I mean, I don't know if he'd be a Trump Republican. I don't think he would be. But he was a Republican, and in a time when I was overwhelmingly a Democrat. I mean, I was a Jack Kennedy guy. I loved that.
yeah. And so you were that way in college, and I'm just trying to
Yeah,
figure out like what switched for you, besides kind of the external stuff, like uh you're going to country clubs or whatever you're going to do
I
professionally.
worked one summer for a guy, um, and I told him, I confessed to him, he ran a marine company, and he was a very rich guy, and I said. I said, I don't really, there's no one I want to be, nothing among my family's friends. I don't like to work that much. I mean, enjoy the business of it, but not that much. He said, hit the road, man, hit the road.
And
And
how
I just,
was
and
this
also
this was
the
before John
road
Lilly or
beckoned.
after? Before the LSD trials or
Oh
after?
yeah, I didn't do the John Lilly stuff until after I got to California. I'd been
Yeah.
cut off by my family. At that point, had made a very small. I had liquidated everything I had, which included a plane that I got for graduation from college. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
And I thought, I was rich. I mean, I'm telling you, so I had a net worth of about $30,000, and I put 12,000 into a thing called Interspace Environments, which was a waterbed company, and actually it did okay until it didn't do okay. And so anyway, and that's when I did the psychedelics in the fall of '69.
Okay. And after each experience, you are reporting on what's happening to you while you're
Deprogrammed was the
okay,
word.
deprogramming.
Mhm.
And what kinds of things were you reporting?
It would be really depressing for you to hear what they extracted from all these multicolor hallucinogenic dreams and places that I went and all that, because they're looking at it in a completely unadorned way as plus 24, minus 48, all these different states of
Right.
consciousness.
Right. So talk
As
about, and plus 24 is like the professional state, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember all that stuff. Minus six study, all that stuff. I mean, I was like, hey, man, I call it what you want. I want to go back there. I was not at all enamored of their methodology,
Got it. Got it.
or not. I would say enamored. I was not interested,
Yeah.
and I read
And
the
so,
book. He wrote an edition and he rewrote it based on this. And
yeah, it
I
was
thought it
like
was
the Center of Consciousness or something.
no, Center of the Cyclone. That's later.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
This is called programming and metaprogramming in the human biocomputer. If you think that's a boring title, read the book. God, it was just dull, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So their kind of clinical interrogations aside, what were you experiencing? Both
I
like
was exp-
kind of visually, what were you seeing, but mentally, what were you absorbing?
I was just being overwhelmed by the beauty of life and by the obstructions of my upbringing and the blindness is created by it. And but to the point where they were just overwhelmingly painful
Yeah.
to not shed them.
Yeah.
And then to step forward into the universe, which was, at that time a world of really infinite possibilities in my mind and in the world. I mean, look at the late 60s, early 70s. Whoa, you know,
Yeah.
anything can happen.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
super interesting. And it wasn't just one session that you did. It was
12.
12 sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
so
did.
was it
Here's the other thing.
yeah.
I did a psychedelic another time when I first moved back to New York in 1975. And we walked around and I had a really bad experience. See, the thing about these experiences was that you had a guide. There was somebody there. Sometimes John Lilly, but sometimes not. And if something went wrong, you just sit up, you're out of the isolation tank, you can talk about a problem. Now, when
Right.
you're on a psychedelic, you're incredibly suggestible. In other words, the world's going to end because you're just in some down spot. And someone says, hey, look up at the sky. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. But you need that.
Yeah.
And like that's why when you talk about ayahuasca, you need a shaman. You need somebody who's done this, who knows where they are, that knows who can keep you out of trouble, and can be a guide and just very little things at certain times. And I had that throughout those experiments because I did psychedelics subsequently, not that much, and I had a few bad experiences, and as a result, I did it very religiously thereafter. In other words, setting and a guide and this,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Set and
yeah,
setting.
yeah.
Yeah. And okay, on the whole, what were these 12 it was over
hmm
like 6 months? Is that right?
I think it was like 20 days, 3 weeks, every 3 weeks, yeah, something like
Every
that.
3 weeks you were
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
a session. So,
yeah.
you know, I think you
Yeah.
said it went to like from September 69 to March 1970.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah. And it sounds like every experience is almost like a death and a rebirth for you.
Yeah, that's the way I'm putting it. I mean, I think the big deaths happened at the outset. And after that, it was kind of like, woo, let's swim around here, let's see
Yeah.
what this is all about. It's
Yeah.
more like exploration. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
And it sounds like what you're describing is just this overwhelming sense of freedom and maybe even agency about the
Possibility,
ability to,
possibility,
yeah,
possibility.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the ability to engage with possibility, or you already think you can engage with it, and your eyes are just open to,
Honestly, engagement is not part of the experience. It's a pretty passive experience, really.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside of the experience in your waking life,
Well, I mean, I think what separates you from this possibility is a lot of work. And that's why psychedelics are not a
definitely.
drug that people take recreationally. It's okay, I got some shit to do now.
Yeah, it
You
kind of
know,
shows you, it teaches
yeah,
you,
I
or it
mean,
exposes you to things, and then it's kind of on
gives you
you.
a glimpse of how it might be, but you gotta get there. You know,
Right. And
yeah,
it's on you to kind of do the work to integrate it and to embody what it's showing you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, okay. So you go through these experiences and then your whole approach to life is transformed.
I still had a day job.
Okay.
I had still had a day job. I was managing this venture, and then I got into a few other ventures. I got into a art house cinemas that
It
I
was the
own.
waterbed company that you
Yeah, a
were,
waterbed,
yeah.
and then there was art house cinemas. Then I got into a building business. Gustafson, Gary, and Britain. We built tree houses in the redwood trees, and it was really amazing. And
Tree houses and redwood
mhm,
trees.
yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I had a house in. I moved in 1972. I moved down to Woodside, which was um, up in the hills above Palo Alto, and I lived on a hillside, and there was a cathedral grove of redwoods, which is a second growth grove of redwoods, probably at that point about 100 years old,
Yeah.
and it was about 12 trees, and I met these guys. This guy was a builder, Dennis Britton, who's still a good friend of mine. I mean, and we went down the hill. I said, I want to put a tree house here. I looked at me like you're fucking crazy, and it was beautiful. And so we did it for other people, and blah 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 blah. And I
Yeah.
mean, it was fantastic. I mean, it was really really, but it was a little bit like a chapel in the trees because it was built on and then put up with I beams were driven through the core of these second growth redwoods
Yeah.
because the energy of redwoods travels in the bark, so you can't hurt the center of the tree. So
Yeah.
we did all this research and we did this. And it was beautiful, really beautiful.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, it was amazing. I mean, first of all, it had 23-foot ceilings, but then there was a sleeping loft, and it was only, I don't know what, 300 square feet or something. It was
Yeah.
nothing,
And
but it
what
was a
did you
great
do with these
place.
houses?
Well, we built them for people.
Okay.
But the one that, I mean, once it's in the tree, it's there, man. You got to do something radical to get it out of there.
Yeah. Are they still there?
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
That's crazy. And so then John Lilly continues to play a role in your life?
Yeah, not really.
Not
He
really.
got very involved with. I did a lot of these little things, you could do, and he did one based on his work with Oscar Chazo that he did. And he wrote this book called Center of the Cyclone, which is about when he went down and studied with this Chilean mystic Oscar Chavo and he got exposed to these different things, consciousness and psychocalisthenics also. And I did a weekend with him in, I don't know, 73 or 4.
Okay.
I did, Est,
Yeah.
Erhard's, blah, blah. I did
Yeah.
these different.
And that was Werner Erhard, right?
Yeah.
I think he was kind of in the same thought group as John Lilly.
No.
No.
No. Oh, no.
Okay.
I mean, Werner Erhard, compared to John Lilly, is a used car salesman. I mean, he was
Yeah.
very eclectic.
Yeah. I agree with that. But I think they work together or like were fellow
I would be
travelers in some ways.
surprised. I personally would be surprised, honestly. Lilly was a different order of magnitude. Werner Erhard was a used car salesman.
Yeah.
I mean, he was.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also Ram Dass.
Man, he was cool. Be
Yeah.
here now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know him very well. I mean, he came to Esalen once and I sat and listened to him.
So how did you get involved with Esalen? Which is, maybe say a little bit about what the Esalen Institute is.
Esalen was this growth center at a time when, which basically, if you think about it, was formed by Dick Price, who was a sort of a guy who had mental issues, but was also a therapist, and Michael Murphy, who was just a rich kid whose family owned a bunch of land in Esalen. He went into meditation, and they formed the Esalen Institute on Murphy's family lands in the late I don't know when, mid-60s probably. And it was just, it was kind of the place where the human potential was born. Murphy was into meditation and West Eastern things, and Dick Price was sort of interested in people that were having some difficulties in providing a shelter for them and different kinds of therapy. And he was a therapist. And so it was a very eclectic, the stuff they did. But they essentially, here we are in the human potential movement. I mean, this was like ground zero. The catalog was full of all these different things I did, probably a half dozen different things I did that had a good influence, I think.
And what kinds of things did you do?
I did the Enneagram, but not till later. That was the Enneagram with a woman called Helen Palmer who wrote the book about it. I did Tai Chi with Al Wang, and then later they would have Al Wang do Tai Chi, and Joseph Campbell would talk about mythology. That was cool.
Yeah.
I did Feldenkrais work with Moshe Feldenkrais and different kinds of. That's a very interesting sort of modality. I was Rolfed. I did yoga.
What is Feldenkrais?
Feldenkrais was an Israeli guy who was a soccer player, and he injured himself, and he came up with this whole system of body work, which involve both table work and exercises, and they're very powerful because they
Yeah.
make you aware, like a lot of things in the human potential, aware of all the choices that you have in anything that you do. So when you try to pick something up, you can pick it up like this or like that or the other way, and it's pretty interesting work. And it's very therapeutic for your body. You know,
Yeah.
and
And what
massage, of course. Oh boy, I
and
love that.
what else did you do at Esalen?
I taught there a lot,
Yeah.
starting around 2000. Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, I did Tai Chi. I did Feldenkrais. I did. Uh,
Did you work with Bob Monroe there?
yes, Journeys Out of the Body. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What
Mhm.
and that is learning how to remove your astral body from your physical body and do
That's
an
right.
out of body
Yeah.
experience. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what the fuck is that like?
Psychedelics are the same thing.
Yeah.
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 I mean, it was a little bit like, okay. I mean, but the thing about this guy,
What do you mean by that? It was a little bit like, okay. These are profound experiences, Jerome, aren't they?
yeah,
Or
but
are
I
they?
mean, yeah, but if something is somehow a reiteration or a version of what you've sort of experienced before, it's not as like overwhelming.
Right.
And, so that did not have the effect of that the psychedelics did. No.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So to you, it was just essentially rehashing your psychedelic experience. There wasn't much new there.
It was really interesting in his techniques and how he was really a plumber. I mean, he really, um, it was just very mechanical the way he did it. I mean, it was amazing. Um, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What were the experiences like? Like, what did you do when you were out of your body?
travel around. You visit people. You tell somebody you visited last night. They went, really? Oh, God.
Did
Anyway,
anyone know that you were there visiting them?
no,
No.
no, no, no. I reference no,
Yeah. Were there any things that you did that were like objectively verifiable after the fact?
no.
No. Yeah. Did you learn, like, did you encounter anything or um, were you taught anything?
All of these things are learning experiences, I think,
Yeah.
and they certainly tell you what not to do
Uh-huh.
and what to do. Um,
Like when I have ayahuasca journeys, right?
yeah,
Each sometimes some of it is kind of you're shown kind of the same things, but a lot of it is cumulative, and each one is very, very unique to me. Um, and the things I'm shown, the experiences I have, each one is distinct, um, and contains its own lessons and experiences, um, and its own kind of mind blowing aspects.
well, that's true, but I mean, I didn't, journal these things or anything like that. I was more like a sort of a hitchhiker of the spirit. You know what I mean? I just like what can I learn from this? Okay, I got
So
what.
you just internalize it, you forget about
Yeah,
it, and you
yeah, a
move
little
on.
bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Like my wife, for example, I'll have dreams, and I go, okay, well, this is what I ought to do on that. And is it, by the way, possible to take a break for 1 minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we take a break for one
Yep.
minute? I mean, just
Yep.
literally,
Okay, we're back from the break and sorted out some technical issues.
Mhm.
Okay, Jerome, one thing that occurs to me as you're talking about the out of body experiences
Yeah.
is, I mean, this is something that most people would not even accept as possible or real, right? The idea of being removed from your physical body and conscious. And I'm so uh impressed maybe at kind of the matter of fact way you talk about it.
You see, this is just who I am. I mean, and also you have to understand that I came to this through this guy Bob Monroe who's like a plumber. He's just a
Well,
blue.
what do you mean by that? He's a plumber,
He's just a kind of a blue
or he's
collar
like a plumber?
guy, and he just, he had this talent, and he tells people how to do it, and he goes boom, 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 you're out, and no amount of like voodoo, or anything involved. It's just like,
Yeah.
do this, do that, head like, but your body to the north. I don't know. But I mean, I have this issue with my wife. My wife has Technicolor dreams, and she comes down and tells me all these Technicolor dreams. And I'll go, well, I dreamt about this. And she says, well, what did you do? I don't remember. Before I wake up, I sort of assimilate it and say, okay, here's what I ought to do.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm a very level kind of,
Yeah.
and also
Yeah.
this was a time where all this stuff was like, I won't say commonplace, but it was out there in the culture.
Right. But I mean, it's one thing for it to be out in the culture, but I mean, did you think that this was real before you did it? Or how did you, because I imagine you did not grow up thinking that one could travel outside of their body.
No, I didn't. But there were a lot of things around at that time, like Bob and Rose, like Seth Speaks was a book that came out that was about this guy, this sort of medium, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of,
And Seth Speaks is like a channeled work,
yeah,
right?
it's
From
a really
supposedly
interesting book.
from
Whoa,
I guess would they call Seth? I mean, Seth is an Egyptian god, but there's like the Law of One, the raw material from the Law of One, which is a channel work from like an extraterrestrial. That's not exactly the best way to say it, but Seth Speaks is
who
similar.
speaks
It's like,
through this person?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The person's a
Yeah.
medium, yeah, and he writes it down. I don't know. I just thought it was an impressive book.
Yeah. Yeah. And you accept it as it is as he says it is for
Yeah,
the most part.
yeah.
Yeah. And out of body experiences, how did you hear about Bob Monroe's work?
He wrote a book called Journeys Out of the Body, and then it was on the Esalen catalog.
Okay. So you found out
Yeah,
about it through Esalen,
yeah.
and you think, oh, totally. Of course you can travel astrally.
Well, let's see.
Yeah. And then you did it. And I mean, were you surprised when you did it? Was it remarkable in any way?
Completely. But it was
Yeah.
also, um, I mean, I always look at these things as like, how did I grow from this?
Right. Right.
And I suppose I have a very, very facile mind. I can jump around different things imaginatively. I mean, it probably afflicts my storytelling and the way I think about things. I see things from multiple perspectives,
Right.
you know?
And would you consider yourself an introspective person?
No,
Okay.
no. Mm-mm. I think I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just,
But I'm
do you,
getting more introverted as I get older.
right. Right. Yeah. It's interesting. And then you also did a lot of meditation at Esalen.
Yeah, there was a guy. Oh, I mean, you don't go to Esalen and meditate. You go to Esalen and get in the baths and get laid. I mean, it was a kind of a different thing. Right? I mean, did I do Joseph Goldstein at Esalen? I did him in Massachusetts, Vipassana meditation. I did TM in the Bay Area. I mean, all part of any yoga. Everything was
Yeah.
meditation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You were always meditating at Esalen. I mean,
Right.
that was part of the deal. Whether it was Tai Chi when we were doing physical stuff, but I don't think I did a meditation workshop per se at Esalen.
Okay.
No.
Got it. You did TM in San Francisco, Transcendental Meditation, which is
Yeah.
like the Mahesh
Yeah,
yogi.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. I've been doing TM for a while.
It's good.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's great. I mean, there are
I-
definitely other forms of meditation.
yeah. I mean, Vipassana, you focus on the breath rather than the mantra.
Yeah.
Fine,
Yeah.
fine.
Vipassana
But
just being
it's
kind
just
of
really good. I mean,
mindfulness
I think it's
meditation.
important. I wish I did more of it.
Yeah. I
But I
think
mean, I have friends.
Vipassana, like very powerful modality, but I think harder to learn than TM. TM, I think, is kind of like the
Yeah, it's
McDonald's of
more
meditation.
consumer friendly.
Yeah.
consumer friendly.
Yeah. But also
Yeah.
still don't want to,
Oh my God! I
you know
have
what I mean?
a childhood friend who's an actor, Stephen Collins, and he his whole life's been a transcendental meditation. There's some tape he had of his wife when he was trying to get divorced, got out there, that would
Yeah.
damned his film career. How
With David
ridiculous!
Lynch too, huge. And did you know
Yeah,
David Lynch?
these guys. Again, I'm sort of one of these guys who goes like, "This was helpful, good."
Right.
I'm not like I'm not looking for something to rule my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And so as you're exploring all this stuff, what's happening in, I don't know, like your professional life, your family life, your life?
Well, I mean, again, I came out to the Bay Area and I was, I succeeded in doing a few different things. I was involved with Celestial Seasonings. I was involved with building tree houses. I was involved with festival cinemas. And these were all, made money in one form or another. Interspace environments, the water, and but never made any real money. Like make a few $100,000 here or there, but it is just, but it was like by the time I was 25 years old, I had maybe $500,000, and I'd turned 30 into $500,000 and
Yeah.
lived like a demon.
Right.
Lived great, and I ended up putting all that into pumping iron, or lived on it. Didn't make a dime for 2 years. Lived on it. Had to sell my loft and then move to a bar, do all these other things. And then Pumping Iron came out, and all of a sudden, I had some money again. And then
Yeah.
next year I was broke, like that.
You were broke the year after Pumping Iron came out?
Well, I got involved with a movie called Old Boyfriends. I got a guy who invested, and we were going to doing pilots. We did a series called Laughs with PJ O'Rourke for
Yeah.
HBO that did, we're making money, but I was spending more than I made. Yeah. And then with my financial backing partner, who's my chairman, a guy called Walter Curley. What a character! Woo, he was a something. Had been the ambassador to Ireland. He was the ambassador to France, and all these things.
Wow.
But he believed in me a lot, and he was great. And he allowed me to, help me fund Stripper. And of course, we all did very well on that. And that's what launched my career in Hollywood.
Yeah. So did he kind of get you into directing?
Well, directing came in several ways. Number one, as I said, on Pumping Iron, we were all sort of, my partner and I were, equally involved in the directing. The DP got a co-directing credit who was even less involved than we were. So I was learning as I went. And then I also, at the same time, started to take acting classes in New York with this guy called Win Hanman to learn how to work with actors. And I was doing a lot of scenes from a play called True West. And he loved the actors I was working. I mean, there were all kind of people who became famous in our class.
Yeah.
In my acting class, this Meisner technique. Anyway, not famous, but there were people who became very well known. And two actors that I was working with, we started doing scenes from True West, and then Win produced it. And it was coming to New York with from the Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago. So he couldn't play it in New York. So we played it all over the place, and then it came to New York for a week. So, I mean, but I directed a play, and that taught me how to work with actors. And then I did Stripper, and that took me to Hollywood with an opportunity. And that kind of soured for me. Major motion picture business was, sort of. It was the end of the American New Wave.
Yeah.
It's actually the end of the American New Wave was 1977. That's when, Rocky came out and Star Wars came out and Pumping Iron came out. But,
Pumping Iron came out. Yeah.
yeah. And so again, like the studio system had sort of succumbed to the business. And I never really connected that well with that,
And so then did you run away from this?
No, I just
Or
wrote scripts. I made a fortune writing scripts. My first film as a major motion picture director.
Before screenwriting, though, you did a very interesting project in the Soviet Union.
Oh, I did, yeah, in the late 70s. Yeah. But here's the thing. This is deceptive. I got a credit on that film, executive producer.
Yeah.
But I spent 2 years going over there with my two partners, Michael Gill, who was Malone Gill, who did, all those big pompous British documentaries, The Commanding Sea, America, Civilization, The Ascent of Man, all those things. Michael Gill was my partner, and this amazing guy with a big influence on me, Fitzroy MacLean.
Yeah.
And he was a Scot. He one of the founders of the SAS. He was flown into Yugoslavia to fight with Tito. He's the only guy that, a foreigner that alone landed in Yugoslavia for years and years and years. I visited them there and met Tito and all this other stuff. But I was going to the Soviet Union twice for 90 days each.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I mean, we were the first production.
It sounds like an unbelievable experience.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he was a huge influence on me because he was he was just broad-minded at a time when the world was not. And he
that's
liked
Fitzroy MacLean.
Yeah. He wrote a book called Eastern Approaches about it as sort of a memoir, and it sold over 2 million copies. I mean, he was a very known guy. He'd been the Secretary of War, blah, blah, blah. He's pretty conservative, but we had big disagreements about the series, about how it should be done, because he wanted to sit in front of a mosque and say, here we are in Kandahar, and I wanted to do it as a sort of a narrative, like in the style of Pumping Iron Show.
Yeah.
But by the time we got a green light, which was when Gorbachev came into power, and that's another story in itself, because we met him and spent time with him. Well, by the time we got a green light, I was working on Strippers, so they went and did it without me.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think it was much of a success. It was on TNT here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the experience was profound, it sounds
oh
like.
my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was amazing. And I think shooting it would have been a big pain in the ass, to be honest.
Yeah, probably. And then would it have been, do you think, logistically problematic or also politically problematic?
Again, we were not in the business of other than revealing the beauty of this place and these people to the rest of the world. We were not in the business of saying what a shithole communism was. I mean, this is my interest in all of these things. I mean, now I'm doing thing called Kingdom Unveiled about showing Saudi Arabia to the world, or to Americans. So I was not interested in the political side of this, although it's impossible to sidestep it,
Yeah.
But I was not trying to reveal what a, horrible the Soviet Union was. I was trying to, show that these were people like us with feelings like us and, certain things about the Soviet Union are 100 times better than America. Let me tell you, if you're an artist in the Soviet Union, well, the art. Huh. Artists are treated royally in the Soviet Union. Royally.
But there was so much censorship that it was hard to create art freely, no?
But here, the Rustaveli Theater Company.
Yeah.
Unquestionably the best theater company in the world. No question about it.
Yeah.
The guy who runs it, Robert Stewart. I mean, he's unbelievable. I mean, he did it at Edinburgh Festival. He did Lear, and the critics said this is the best Lear ever been done anywhere. In Georgia.
Yeah.
He was Brecht in Georgia. I'm dying of laughter. So one day, he's rehearsing Lear. Okay, and I'm at that point I was involved a little bit with his daughter. Anyway, and by the way, Georgians are very conservative. Oof. They're not libertines the way Russians are. Anyway, so he puts it up for me. Me and Fitzroy are there, and we watch this thing, and it's perfect. It's fantastic. I said, well, when are you going to open it? I said, I don't know, when I'm in the mood. I said, well, they don't have any box office. They don't have anything. They don't have a car, and any decent actor or anything has a car and a driver and, is paid like a normal person.
Oh, wow.
So the arts are really, I mean, you can't, be iconoclastic about the regime.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of shit to say besides, the politics.
So, within certain boundaries where the art is approved of by the state, then but part of that is because there is a real appreciation for the power of art.
Yes, but on the other hand, too, the republics kind of went there. I mean, the republics, they didn't ride herds too aggressively on the republics.
Yeah, got it. That's interesting. And then, okay, so Stripper comes out then, and that is like a critically acclaimed movie. that you
Yeah,
directed.
I thought it was better than Pumping Iron, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, who was it? Gloria Steinem that,
Or said this, she like these.
yeah.
Yeah, what did she say about it? She said something about it. It was very funny. Um, the thing about it was that women liked it more than men.
Yeah.
And 20th Century Fox had paid a shit pile of money for it. Um, yeah, couldn't get over that because they thought they were going to get guys in raincoats to come and sit in the front row, and women liked it more than men.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, well, great Simon, the great lesbian director. That's me. That was funny. Yeah,
What's that?
she called me the great lesbian
Oh,
director.
wow. That's really funny.
I actually, I don't think it was ever in print, but I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what, how did that impact you? How did that alter your career or,
Well, it was first movie really surfaced me as a director, as
yeah.
somebody who could direct Hollywood films because it had a very Hollywood kind of feel to it. And it was done sort of like shot like a narrative film. It was shot by Ed Lockman, who's been nominated for a few Academy Awards. And so it got me out there. And then, I had this big opportunity to direct this movie. I mean, I had a lot of opportunities. I wasn't as focused as I should have been at that time. And I didn't know how the business worked. And, I was involved with all these different projects. And I wasn't able to find the right thing that interfaced with how limited my experience was and how much I probably needed a mentor of some kind or someone to work with. So there's any number of factors that conspired against me succeeding. But the first film
Yeah.
that I did, even though there are things I liked about it a lot, was never finished. We shot 36 out of 60 days. And the distributor was Dino De Laurentiis, who went bankrupt in the middle of it.
Wow.
And they released it, but I mean, they had what's called an output deal. So if you give them anything, they have to pay you. And, but I mean, we'd shot it just over half of it. And it was a bust, but no one really kind of blamed me or anything because it was just a big mess, the closing of De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. But I was there, hey, it's been a while since Stripper, and then all of a sudden, instead of having stars in their eyes about me, they're like, well, it's been 3 years and it was just a documentary and this and that. So things suddenly got hard for me. And the path of least resistance was, writing.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were also uh, developing an aversion to the business of Hollywood.
Well, I mean, I don't develop aversions. I have aversions. I
It
mean, I
just comes
just
to
did,
you in a
yeah,
flash. Yeah.
yeah, I don't have to study it.
So
I
that's
mean,
even,
I didn't like the business of the business, but ironically, my best friend out there was a guy called John Daly, who was a scoundrel. Well, a Wall Street Journal article said if someone killed John Daly, there'd be 7,000 suspects. He was this guy who was just a hustler. He'd managed he says fights and all this other shit. Did the Rumble in the Jungle. He was just a street kid from the Midlands that was just a fighter, but he had great taste. And so if you think of the movies he did Platoon. He did what was the movie that preceded it about Salvador? Platoon, The Last Emperor,
wow.
uh, Hoosiers. You can't believe that he did if you did the top 25 films of the 80s, he did at least half of them.
Wow.
And he and he was my best friend. We were looking for something to do. When I met him, he had Diane Keaton attached to something, and Diane Keaton liked Stripper and said she'd do a movie with me. So I read the script and I said, and the agent says, oh, you got to go meet John Daly. He's doing some interesting shit. So I meet Daly. And I said, I don't like this script very much. He said, oh, no, come on, what about this? And he acts the scene. And I'm cracking up. I'm dying. I said, look, here's what. I'll run your studio, and you direct the movie. How's that? So anyway, we looked around for something to do for a long time, but he would have been a great guy to do it with because, he would have mentored me a little bit,
Yeah.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
was my best friend for 2 years. Yeah.
And so
He
then
was
you
a
switched.
scoundrel. Everybody hated him.
Why'd you like him?
because he was charming and and he liked me and he I mean, he paid me money to write. He was really good. We had one project, Fighting Back. I loved it, which was about
Yeah.
Polish Jews going to the woods during World War II and fighting the Germans. And this couple, they're about to get married, and Germans occupy Warsaw the day they're getting married. They never get married, and they go to the country and they fight. A fabulous story, God. But we just never, that happens in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
one of these guys that just sort of whatever sticks to the wall, he'll do. Yeah, but he did great movies. I mean, geez, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Very, very interesting. And in any case, after this, you become a screenwriter.
I did that from about 93 to about 2000. And then I did production rewrites. I did these different shit where you
Yeah.
get paid a lot of money. But the thing was that around 2000, I took this job at the Institute for Creative Technologies. And uh, that was I was making a fortune writing screenplays that didn't get made, or for the most part didn't get made. A couple got made. And, I got a call and the guy says, well, these people are doing this interesting stuff, these think tanks, and they need someone to help them with their government relations work. And they need someone. I had two calls, actually. It was kind of funny. Government relations work and
Yeah.
um, think tanks were using the creative and people, the entertainment. It's a
And
creative
why did they
resource.
think you would be good at government relations?
I knew everybody. I mean, I knew a lot of people. I mean, not in any way that I called them up every day, but I went to college with George Bush, who's a good friend of mine. Mark Dayton, I played hockey with in college, and I grew up with him.
Who's Mark Dayton?
Mark Dayton was the governor of Minnesota,
Okay.
and he was a senator before that. He was a senator in 2000. My sister-in-law was a senator, so I had some connections, and they said, and I sort of gave the air of being, connected to other than Hollywood. And so I said, well, yeah, it sounds interesting. Maybe let me go to New York, to Washington and find out. So I went and I talked to my friends, my associates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they told me how to do it and get a government relations guy and all that stuff. And so I did it. It was a huge success. Good God, we raised a ton of money. And we did these think tanks, which were the most interesting thing that I have probably done ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were some of the think tanks that you did? And also, okay, before you answer that question, how much did it seems like now you're starting to become a storyteller in many ways. You're getting into screenwriting, and I guess, well, being a director, I guess, is also
At this point
very
in my
much being a
life,
storyteller. Yeah.
At this point in my life, well, again, storytelling, the most important story you have to tell is your own.
Yeah.
But I even after learning all about storytelling and how important it is and this and that, I mean, when I was 24 years old, Arnold comes up to me and says, General, where do you want to be in 7 years? I go,
Arnold
what?
being Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I go, Arnold, I don't, I think I toke him a joint and say, I don't know where I want to be tomorrow, never mind 7 years. But he was the first guy who makes you think strategically about your life. But even now, like I'm not trying to build some castle, I'm trying to just, well, that sounds fun. Let's do it,
Yeah.
So
It
I
seems like
never, yeah, go ahead.
it seems like you're almost disappointed that you're not more strategic or more don't take a longer horizon to your life, but you've lived
Well,
such an
okay.
incredible life, I think.
Well, here's the thing. Materialism, I was disabused of materialism by growing up with it. In other words, I absolutely did not think of this as something highly desirable to me,
Right.
because I saw what it did to people. On the other hand, if Mike Bloomberg had been my father, I would have realized that, money's just a tool. And if you have it and you succeed at it, you can use it to do things that without it, you couldn't do.
Right.
And I am
And
truly good at making money.
I understand what you're saying, but just say it out loud. Why is that?
Why money?
Why the difference between Mike Bloomberg versus, I guess, Ted Gary in your case?
Well, I mean, Mike Bloomberg is a guy that really did good things with his money, that earned his own money. Ted Gary was just a high living, probably an alcoholic, and who did a lot of different businesses, was very charming. But, there's nothing inspirational about the way he lived his life other than he was a bon vivant, beautiful athlete. Holy shit, what a good athlete. Damn. Hmm.
Was he a
Yeah.
nice guy?
Yeah, very charming, but, a little bit of a cloud when he drank. But yeah, I mean, he was high. Yeah, I mean, I think most people in that era were highly functioning alcoholics.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Right. Well, he had like 3 martini lunches and things like that.
no, yeah, he drank. I mean,
No,
he did,
he
but
did, but that was kind of
I don't
common.
know. It was. I mean, they'd get up. I remember when I was growing up, they'd have bull shots of Bloody Marys and all that.
Okay.
But he was. He just wasn't. He. I was not witness to his abilities to do other than spend money.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think a guy like Mike Bloomberg, and also like this guy, Arch from Midlands, what's his name? I forgot his name now. It was an influence on me. These guys that I admired, if I'd had that kind of a father and I'd seen, I mean, that's what interests me now. I'm very interested in what success looks like. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't successful because they don't know what it looks like and
And
what
what
the
does
traits
success look
are.
like to you now?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's about loving what you do and getting satisfaction from it,
Yeah.
and being able to go where you want, how you want, the way you want. And if that involves having a lot of money, then it's a lot of money. But if it's not, it's not. But I mean, to me, you know, I'm very interested in developing a series about success, but different kinds, not just material success.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's a very, I think a lot of kids, when I go to the gym in the afternoon and I see these lost boys in their 20s, I go, if they really knew what success looked like and why you should do it and what the rewards of it were and how it made you feel and how it made you appreciate it and admire all these things. I mean, it's a very complex subject, but I mean, Arnold was certainly an influence.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, I
do
didn't
you
want to have
view
big
yourself as
muscles.
successful?
I've had a hell of a good time.
Yeah.
I've had a hell of a good time, but I mean, I'd like to have more money. But and I'm 78 years old. I don't think I'm gonna go out and try to make a shit pile more money. Although I'm doing a couple of things now, I could make some money of it, good money. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, first of all, my wife, is very successful in her own right. I mean,
Yeah.
we
Very.
share the expenses and that's it. So,
Yeah.
she's, I mean, so we don't need a lot of money, and we're not, in other words, I grew up with 5 houses. I don't want to have 5 houses. I want to have one house, and then I want rented grandeur. I want to rent a place in an island, someplace for a week or here or there, rented grandeur for 2 or 3 weeks a year in different places.
Yeah.
That's all I want. I just think I've seen the burden of wealth.
But you kind of do that now, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I mean, when I
So
was
why do you
growing
want
up,
more?
I would have more resources to get Trump out of out of office, among other things. I would have more resources to do the things that I think are important. If I wanted to do a series about success, I just do it.
Yeah.
Now I have
Yeah.
to talk to people and talk them into it.
Right. Yeah.
But I know I have all I want. But I mean, sometimes you think, gee, wouldn't it be great if I had? I don't care about a faster car, or I don't care about I fly in business class. I don't know. I feel fine. I don't need to charter jets. I grew
Right.
up on jets, on helicopters and stuff. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think you've kind of got all a man could want. And I think you've lived an incredible life and you should be proud of yourself, I think.
Well, thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. You are in a stage in your life right now. And I think kind of, your work at ICT was kind of a transition point for you where you become a teacher.
Well, I took a job. Uh, I think if I'll regress just slightly and then go back into it. I got a call after I sold my second spec script for $1 zillion, and it was in the trades, and this guy called me up, Deju Magyar, who's a guy who I'd worked with before and who's a teacher, and I'd come in and guest in disguise. They said, "We have a job. Would you be interested in teaching at the AFI?" Which was by far the best of all the film schools for many reasons. But I mean, USC has the best reputation, but AFI is a conservatory. You have to choose your discipline, which means the students are older, much higher success rate, blah, blah. But it's not as well known as USC. I taught at USC too, but
Right.
calls me up and says, "How'd you like to teach?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What, like directing, producing?" He said, "Screenwriting." I said, "Screenwriting? What are you talking about, screenwriting?" He said, "Well, you were just all in the trades and everything, da da da." I said, "Yeah, but they're about tigers loose in LA. They're not really serious movies." And he said, "Well, that's what's available." So I said, "Well, okay, I want to meet the other people that teach and see how they teach and what they do." And I did that, and I made some very good friends, and all the people were working screenwriters. They were not just guys who had a job like at USC where people have jobs there because they can't get a job somewhere else. So I started teaching, and I just loved it.
Yeah.
And it made me a much better writer. And it made me also, I realized where certain mistakes that I'd made in my life that I could help people to avoid. And I was just good at nurturing, sensing what people needed and doing it. And over 15 years, I mean, they started to move me into a big lecture class that I did as well. And I like that too, because, everybody loves to be heard. But my real talent was for, taking a group of 12 to 15 kids and mentoring them for 2 years, during which time they write 3 screenplays and prepare for a life in the industry, and now people I've taught are, running a business. I mean, they're,
Yeah.
they're running it, and I'm still close to a lot of them. But you
Like
really
who?
too, Patty Jenkins,
Yeah.
it was especially successful. Another student of mine was a guy called Sam Esmail, who's Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
But I'm not really close to him now. Then I have another called Sarah Mast, who's a sort of a preeminent reality person. There's another guy called Michael Petroni who's done very, very well, although you don't really hear about him that much. Chan Chu was a student, and who just did Wicked and Crazy Rich Asian.
Crazy Rich Asians. Yeah.
That's right. There you
I
go.
love that movie.
Yeah, I mean, he went to USC, but he was a student. I had a lot of people that I taught. I mean, if I really, I'm sure I'd come up with a dozen people that are in pretty prominent positions
Yeah.
now there, and so I enjoyed that. But from teaching, I segued into the ICT. I started doing these think tanks where I don't know if I've described it in this chunk of time, but you put 12 to 15 people with a problem in the room with out of the box thinkers from the entertainment industry, known generally, and you mix it up for a week.
Yeah.
6 to 10, 4 nights a week. The fifth night was a dinner party at my house where everybody mingled. And then you turn out a white paper. And we did this with CIA, with, DIA, with FBI, with Mitsubishi, Sony, all these people. And it was really interesting. And I was a organizer and mediator on most of them. My associate Dick Lindheim did some of them, but most of them I did. And I was, the reason I was so good at it was because, first of all, I knew the people.
Yeah.
But secondly, and also subsequently, CIA people hired me to do these think tanks. No one gives a shit what you think. Just keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going.
Right.
But I did think tanks on subjects I knew nothing about. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I knew, about the future of the world in 2040 or whatever it is.
Yeah. And it sounds like this work is very much in line with kind of your the other things that you've done, kind of seeking, the consciousness work you've done. And I'm wondering, what are some of the highlights of things that you learned doing these things?
I think what this segued to was after 9/11, I became increasingly convinced that, that just what I was thinking of in the Russians, which was, that we need to understand other people and they need to understand us better.
Yeah.
So that became my sort of vector after that. And,
it's interesting because that's something that Arturo spent a lot of time talking about.
Well, I just think, first of all, Arturo is the guy that set me out on a lot of this. There were two things that happened.
which
One
is
is,
which is who is Arturo Munoz, who I just interviewed for this
yeah,
podcast.
he's a very senior guy in CIA, and he was at the time running the Afghan shop, and I was giving a think tank on, I don't, who knows, always strategic communications in the Arab world. We were putting together, like, what can we do to, make them understand us better, and blah blah. And I interjected, which I rarely do. I said, well, let's stop cramming our shit down their throats, and let's let's teach them to tell their stories, to heal their culture. And so at the break, Big A, as I now call it, with his 5 black belts and his 2 doctorates, comes up to me and says, how'd you like to do that? And I went, yeah. And 6 months later, I'm in Kandahar with, a team of teachers, teaching. We gave certificates to 148 people.
Amazing.
Taught them television production, filmmaking to both stations. That was a great thing. I mean, that was really a great thing. And then there was a group that came to us and wanted us to do a think tank so they could figure out public diplomacy initiatives, television initiatives in our world. And so I put together everybody, Dick Wolf and David Milch and all these, 800-pound gorillas in the business. And we all get in a room and, and they pitched what they're doing, Leolina Productions, and they want to, do these public diplomacy television initiatives. So what's Dick Wolf going to do? He's going to do Law and Order in Cairo, and what's David Mills going to do? NYPD Blue, Tangier, blah. And I said, well, let's do road rules with Arabs. Let's get, Arabs who don't like America, drive them across America with an American film crew. Yeah. And it was a big hit, huge hit, and a big success from a public diplomacy perspective.
Yeah. Why was it so successful from a public diplomacy perspective?
But first of all, it's basically you audition all over the region, but you try to find people who are not necessarily pro-American, but they speak English, and Americans would like them. Very important.
Yeah.
They might hate America, but Americans would like them. And then and attractive kids, kids that people want to watch, that are charismatic, and then you put them together and you kind of figure out how they get along and try to balance it out and everything, and then you meet them and wherever it is, New York or LA, where we start, and we drive across. We spend 8 weeks or whatever it is, 6, 8, 10 weeks together with the crew on an RV, traveling around America and meeting people, and invariably, they almost all didn't particularly like America at the beginning, and they all fall in love with the place.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. And they meet, and it's very, this real redneck in Texas, meets this Palestinian, and Palestinian says, well, you hate us. And it's just, who hates you? I mean, it really had a lot of magic to it, the show. But in the Middle East, the broadcaster was Middle East Broadcasting. NBC1, the biggest network by far in the Middle East. And, the second season averaged 9 to 13 million viewers.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a big success because America, I mean, it's just this thing I want to do about Saudi Arabia. The audience sees it through the point of view of the people that are on the trip.
Yeah.
So similarly, when we took Americans over the Middle East, Americans saw the Middle East through the eyes of young Americans that were going over to see what happened in the footsteps of the Arab Spring.
And what did they love about America?
Freedom was a factor. The beauty was a factor. The relationships that they formed. I mean, one of the really beautiful relationships was between a Palestinian woman, gorgeous, oh my God, Lara, and an Israeli DP, director of photography, who is actually, Palestinians and Israelis don't even talk.
Yeah.
They try to kill each other. And they became best friends.
Wow.
So it was just this interface. And you got to choose it right. You got to do the standard shit you have to do as a producer. But I mean, it was pretty fun. And we had people in front of us scouting and, encountering, trying to figure out, not on the nose stuff, like stuff that you meet with people that are doing unusual things or have unusual points of view about things, and keep it like it was an event. It was an adventure, it's a road trip.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah. And what are you up to today?
Well, I did that, and now I'm doing, for the last 6 years, I've run this thing called the MENA. I got a lot of grants from the State Department. We got a lot of grants for the ICT and a lot of grants for public diplomacy initiatives because they were so successful. So the last 6 years, I've been running this thing called the MENA, Middle East North Africa Media Fund, and we invest in Arab media. And we invest in a lot of stuff. And we have some things pending now. The big thing we didn't go, but we did one called Confessions from a War, which is a stunner, which is about the Lebanese Civil War. And
Yeah, it was an
we did a lot
incredible
of,
movie.
we have a lot of stuff, we have some inventory of stuff. We got a little bit bushwhacked by COVID, and but and the business being in such transition. But we got a lot of things cooking now, and not the least of which is one where we're going to take Americans to Saudi Arabia, Kingdom Unveiled, and which I think will be a very good thing because the Saudis really need, something, because there's a sort of a, they what they want to do is put together like a, kind of like a completely artificially, ridiculous trip about a fantasy land called Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And this series,
And the Saudis
absolutely.
right now are spending, I think, a lot of money
Yeah.
doing media
And so,
outreach,
and they
and
want to
yeah,
have movie stars on it, on a fantasy trip to Saudi Arabia. And I said, no, no, no. This, it needs an authentic air. It cannot be, in other words, obviously you want people to like Saudi Arabia, but you don't have to, like do it all like it's, and you're at the Ritz, and then it has to have an air of authenticity to it. It does. And you have to meet really authentic people and have authentic interchanges and have these kids expressing their opinions about what they're seeing all the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds
There you go.
like a really cool project.
Yeah. I'm hoping it happens.
Yeah,
Um, I've had a Lebanese partner, Danny Jabour, for 6 years, and the most talented filmmakers in the Middle East. Most of what we did was in Morocco and Tunisia and Lebanon, to a lesser extent, Egypt and Jordan. But, you know, uh, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be good. The Lebanese are by far the most talented filmmakers in the area, in the
yeah.
region. Yeah.
So I guess as you look back on your life up to this point,
Yeah.
with a lot of life still to go,
Mm.
what you've had these just eye-popping experiences. And one, I'm wondering, like, what have you learned, right? What have you internalized? How do you think you've evolved? And two, how you spend so much of your life as a seeker, it seems to me. And I'm wondering, how are you seeking today, and what has stuck with you?
Well, I mean, I could be less sybaritic. I mean, I love, what are we doing tonight? I've ruled a little bit by that. And, I think, I've had periods of extreme asceticism in my life, in various disciplines. And I think that I could have more of that. And, but, I'm kind of, I'm thinking about writing something, about my life. But, I think I probably will. But I mean, I just want to keep having a good time. I'm very, very lucky to have the wife that I have,
Yeah.
who puts up with me, first of all. But second of all, she's like, to be unbelievably disciplined and hardworking and talented and every other thing.
Yeah. We haven't really talked about Mary, but she is like a creative genius.
Oh, well, I mean, she's first of all, yeah, but she's also an engineer. She figures shit out. You know what I mean? I'm sort of like intuitive and like, well, yeah, I'll take this couch. She gets out a measuring tape. She's very methodical about things. Actually,
Yeah.
to a surprising extent, really good film directors are kind of problem solvers in a way. Yeah. Mm.
Interesting.
Apart from being poets,
Yeah.
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 I'm very lucky with that. And then my son, my God, my son. I feel very fortunate because I don't think I was terribly well fathered. As a matter of fact, it wasn't. I had a lot of surrogate fathers,
Yeah.
but but I think I've learned how to be a good father to him, and he's doing really well, which is the best indication. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
yeah. God, oh, that's a very funny story. I tell you, I was so much dope I used to smoke and everything, and once in a while I would smoke dope with my son. maybe 10 years. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
once a
Yeah.
year, something like that. I smoked some dope, and then he said one day, he said, Dad. I said, what? He said, when you smoke dope, you're just a little bit dumber. That was the end of my dope smoking. That was the end of that. That was 10 years ago.
Oh man, that reminds me, your remote viewing career. We never talked about that, but you were smoking a lot of dope when you were
That was
remote
actually, I
viewing.
wasn't smoking a lot of dope, but I
Okay.
did. They learned from doing these things in remote viewing at the SRI that I made 2 seasons of that, but I got cut. But the dope it impedes this process of whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
divining, intuiting, or
Yeah.
traveling, psychic voyaging. Contrary to what you might believe, because dope sort of transports you to other worlds, it's counterproductive in this.
Yeah.
Uh, and alcohol is not.
Oh, interesting.
No, the gateway sort of it loosens the gateway a little bit.
Very
Um,
interesting.
yeah, that came up in Seth Speaks, and they mentioned it to me, at SRI. But so, and again, when I got dropped, I mean, I still smoked dope. I smoked a lot of dope between 1969 and 73. Between 73 and 2003, I probably smoked in 30 years, 30 times,
Yeah.
just.
Okay, can I ask you some questions about the remote viewing program? Because I am so fascinated by
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that is just, you know, crazy that it's even possible. But how was the testing set up?
You,
How did you get into it in the first place?
you start out by sort of meeting somebody, and then they go into another room,
Yeah.
and you sort of say what they're doing. And then then they inject distance into things a
Yeah.
little bit. And they never tell you how you're doing. They never tell you what's really going on or what's not going on. They sometimes will validate something if you're dead on the money and say, did that feel any differently?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
again, it's so, you see, you think of these as sort of collective experience. You're not. You're alone with a guy who's the monitor or something.
Right. Right.
So it doesn't feel like you're part of some big event. It's just you're some guy in a room sitting with a guy and a person in the next room.
Sure.
They try different, with people with you, who might work better or what. And sometimes it works better if you're somebody that They ask you to bring somebody and that
Yeah.
sometimes works better. So they try different modalities with you. But, essentially I had pretty good intuition or psychic, but not good enough to make the cut. And I made season 2, but not season 3.
Right. Which you stayed in the program for 2 years.
Yeah.
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 So, and during that time, they didn't give you any indication of how good you were doing,
No. Mm.
other
They
than
would
the fact that
encourage.
you were still there.
Yeah. But they were not. They were only a few weeks. They were about 12 weeks, I think, each year.
Each one. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm,
Super
yeah.
interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
And there were some people that were involved in other things I did. I mean, we were all spiritual nuts in
Yeah.
those days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, not everyone was, but that was the world you were in.
Well, I mean, but on the West Coast in
Oh,
the
right.
late '60s, early '70s, there was a high incidence of seekers. You
Yeah.
know,
Definitely.
you
Definitely.
know.
And that's stuck with you for your whole life, no?
Well, I mean, I've just continued to be an opportunist. I don't know. I just think I'm interested in doing fun stuff and learning new things. I mean, if anything, if you think, okay, where I've grown into, which is like, um, like other cultures, other races, yeah, I've, conversely become a lot less interested in gringos, particularly rich gringos with whom I grew up. I find them not as interesting as Arabs or black people or anybody, people who have different cultural experiences. I'm just more, I have to say most of my friends are, you know, gringos, but I'm just, I'm less interested in the things that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although, Peter Duchin is one of my best friends. And
Yeah.
he's pretty right there where I grew up, you know.
Yeah. Who is my stepdad, and
Yeah,
just an amazing
amazing,
man, and such a
amazing.
nice guy.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess, have you found peace in life?
Wow. Um, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy. I mean, I find myself less and less interested in going out, and I'm liking to read, and I like to prepare for things. I like to. Health is a big issue for me.
Yeah.
I have to. I really need to be being disciplined, not drinking too much, not eating too much, going to the gym, doing yoga. At the end of my workout, it's incredibly important. I mean, it's harder and harder for me to get up out of a couch. I gotta stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's the way it goes. Well,
yeah,
Jerome, thank you so much
yeah, man.
for coming on the podcast and sharing all
Yeah.
your
Well, good
incredible
luck with this. Good luck
experiences.
with this. It's a
I
very
appreciate it.
interesting form. I'm learning it myself. I mean, not
Yeah.
learning because I'm
Yeah. Awesome.
yeah.
All
Good luck
right.
to you. All right.
Well, thank you, sir. Bye.
Take care, man. Bye.